Thank you all so much for having me here today, and my beautiful wife Charlotte, and we appreciate y'all so very much. And by the way, I've always wanted to be a preacher, but I just never could cut it. So this feels really good.
Amen.
See if I can work this. I'm doing something wrong.
Let me see.
About the little green light.
Let me see. There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much for asking.
Yes.
I met the pastor a few weeks ago at George's restaurant in Hewitt. Got to meet him and his wife and another friend. And as we were leaving, there were 6 officers, including me, deputy sheriffs, and he came outside and said, "Do you mind if I say a prayer with y'all?" I said, "Absolutely, please do." So he said the most beautiful prayer, and we're standing on the sidewalk of George's, people coming and going. Some of them were stopping and putting their head down, and very reverent and all that. It was just overwhelming, and I appreciate that so much. It meant an awful lot just to be right there in front of everybody, and your pastor was saying this beautiful prayer and blessing law enforcement. And as you know, law enforcement in a lot of places is under attack, except here. We're so fortunate to have the good citizens that we have that support us, because we couldn't do the job that we do out there without the support of our good citizens. And a lot of our crimes that we solve are because of citizens calling us and giving us information. Some police departments say, "Oh, stay out of it. We don't need, we'll take it from here," or whatever. We welcome any information, any input that we get from our good citizens, because every one of y'all out there can be the eyes and ears of our law enforcement community, not just the sheriff's office, but all police. So we appreciate y'all's input. We appreciate y'all's interest in law enforcement here. And that's what's making it so successful here. And I want to thank you for that. Law enforcement needs the Lord and Jesus Christ in it.
Amen.
And so years ago I put something on our cars, our SWAT vehicles, our helicopters. We've got 3 helicopters. They've all got it on there, and that is "In God We Trust."
Amen.
Right above that is the American flag. Also on the vehicle is "Your safety comes first." And I tell our guys, when you go out to get in that vehicle or that car truck every day, before you get in it, you read "In God We Trust." Then you look at the American flag, and then you read "Sheriff" on the side before you get in your car. If you don't have Christ and the Lord riding with you, you're riding alone. And so we try to instill that into our officers. I'll tell you a little bit about some of our efforts here, and I also want to say I've seen some, I can't say old friends anymore because that's a bad reflection on me. Longtime friends here. And there's a gentleman here, James Wright, that was with the Texas Rangers, that ran with me and my brother. He's sitting there in the back. James, God bless you for the job you did, and we appreciate that. And anyway, I want to ask everyone in here who has been in the military or has family members in the military, would you please raise your hand? Wow, over half the church. That is so incredible. Thank you all for your service. Thank you, family members, for your service. Please tell them how much we appreciate them.
Amen.
Y'all are the reason. Yes. Y'all are the reason we're in here safe today. And so please go back if they're not here and thank them from the bottom of our heart for their service. And that's why we're here safe. That's why we're here free. A little family history. Grew up in Waco, was born here, raised here, went to school all through my school days. Graduated from Baylor University. My brother was my partner in life, partner in law enforcement. He and I both hired on the same day in October of 1970. So this is 52 years that I've been in law enforcement here in Central Texas. But it goes back much further than that. It goes back to 1902 when Guy McNamera, my great uncle, my granddad's brother, was a constable here in 1902. Then he was chief of police of Waco for many years. And then President Roosevelt appointed him the head United States Marshal for the whole Western District of Texas. That went from Centerville to El Paso. It was the largest district until Alaska was admitted. And of course, all of Alaska is the biggest district. But anyway, that's where our family started. My father was chief deputy sheriff here when he was 21 years old. He put in 36 years with U.S. Marshals. My grandfather was a deputy sheriff here in 1905, and then he went with U.S. Marshals. I put in right at 33 years, and my brother put in 34 years. So kind of grew up in a law enforcement family, and I feel so fortunate to be your sheriff. And the sheriff is the people's voice in law enforcement. The people hire the sheriff. When I was with U.S. Marshals, the government hired me. The U.S. Department of Justice hired me. But the people, y'all, hired me as the sheriff. And I appreciate that every day. And I'm your voice in law enforcement. Our deputies are your voice. And very seldom do I say I mean we. I'm just a spoke in the wheel. I've got the best team. Right now we have around 615 employees in the sheriff's office here. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's admin personnel, deputies, narcotics, detectives, jail personnel, people under the sheriff's office. So I feel so fortunate to be the sheriff of y'all's county, and I will continue to be the sheriff as long as y'all want me. So thank y'all so much for that. I grew up in a very Christian home. My father was a really tough lawman. He was a gentleman, but he was very devout. So was my mother. We had to be in church every Sunday, no matter what. At the end of the day, we all got on our knees by the side of the bed with our hands folded and said our prayers.
Amen.
That went on till we were in high school, and even after that. So I was very fortunate to have that good Christian background from my family. And they asked me to say the prayer in 1954. I was 7 years old for the 100th anniversary of the Bosqueville Baptist Church. That was a terrible mistake. I prayed for 8 minutes. And I don't know where it just kept coming on, and somebody said, I never thought you were going to shut up and sit down. So I couldn't help myself. So anyway, that was the last and only time they ever asked me to say the prayer there. So, my parents allowed us to cut up like most all kids, you know, as long as we didn't do anything illegal. We weren't disrespectful to our elders. We had to say yes ma'am and no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. We were not allowed to call police officers cops. We had to call them policemen or police officers. And so when it got to church, we had to act right. And let me see here. I'm doing something wrong. I don't know how to operate this thing. There we go. Going to church as a youngster, we had to wear coats and ties every Sunday. And so I want y'all to know that my brother and I did not pick out those sport coats. That's pretty bad. But here we are going to church back in the 50s. I think I was 10 there, maybe. And that's my mom and dad. They would always go to church with us. My mom was quite a character, also, she was a little bitty thing. She would teach Sunday school, and then she would go ride her Harley Davidson in the afternoon. And if any of y'all have seen the video of the little elderly lady in her wheelchair shooting a machine gun, has anybody seen that? Raise your hand. Some of y'all have. Anyway, that's my mom at 92 years old. My dad gave her a machine gun as a joke back in the 60s for her birthday, and she loved it. It backfired on him because she kept it, and she shot it until about 3 weeks before she passed away in 2011. And so she was 95. But she would always, after church, she'd say, "Pa, can we go to the firing range and let me shoot my machine gun?" I said, "Sure." So I'd load her magazines, and she'd sit there in her wheelchair and blaze away. And so, anyway, she was something else. That's Mike and me on our ponies, wanting to be lawmen or something, cowboys. I was 7 and he was 6. We always had horses. My dad was a big horse person. And there we are later years as U.S. Marshals. And I put that in there just so you can see proof that my little brother finally grew up and started acting right. One day in church, we had to be very quiet. I looked over there, heard some people behind us laughing. And my little brother, who's I think 4 or 5 at the time, had turned around in the pew and he was making faces at the people behind him. And they were having a hard time keeping laughing. So my mom grabbed him and said, "Do you want to go outside?" That was her main threat. And he said, "That's just where I want to go." And she said, "Well, you're not going to like what's happening to you when you get outside." So we heard him hollering a little bit, and he came back in. You couldn't make him talk out in church for anything after that. Bear with me just a second. This happened in 1996. I was in church with my mom at Lakewood Christian Church, and they had a reunion, a 50-year reunion of the church. And so they had all the members stand up that were charter members, which my parents were. So she stood up and introduced my brother to me and said, "This is my 2 sons, Parnell and Mike, and they're both backsliders." And so I looked around and I'm going, "Mom, why did you say that?" And she said, "Well, because you are." So, anyway, she was very forthright. I was sitting in church behind her one day, same year. I was 50 years old, U.S. Marshals. And these 2 elderly ladies sitting beside me couldn't hear the preacher. And they're going, "What did he say? I can't hear a word he says. What did he say? What does he mean by that?" She whirls around and pointed a finger at me and said, "Do you want to go outside?" I said, "No, Mom." I said, "It's them." So I ratted these 2 old ladies out. I said, "It's them." She said, "It was not, I heard you." I said, "You don't be quiet, you're going outside." I'm going, you know, here I am, 50 years old, I'm a federal officer, got a machine gun and a shotgun in my car. I had a 45 automatic on, and this little 90-pound lady's fixing to throw me out of church. So after it was over, I said, "Mom," I said, "that wasn't me. It was the 2 elderly ladies that were sitting beside me." "It wasn't either. It was you. I heard you, and don't you ever do that again." I said, "Okay, Mom." Anyway, I wanted to tell y'all about a trip that Charlotte and I took with Parkview Baptist Church to Israel and the Holy Lands. That was a life-changing experience for all of us. And sometimes it's hard for me to talk about it because it was so emotional to us. But I'm going to go over some of the things, some of the places that we went. And if any of y'all ever want to go, you really must go because it is so real. Every place you read about in the Bible is there, and you can stand right there where it happened. And so we flew into Tel Aviv. We operated from there, different places. We had 25 or 26 members on our tour. Our guide was a very good guide. He was an Arab converted to Christianity.
Amen.
And he knew the Bible so well. And he would read scriptures where we were standing from the Bible, and then he would give the expanded history of that place. It was just so unbelievable. First place we went was the Valley of Elah, where David slew Goliath. A beautiful valley, and it's just so overwhelming because they know right where David was standing, where the Hebrews were, where he walked down, where Goliath came down from the other side of the valley, where the Philistines were, and the creek in the Bible where David got the rocks to use in his slingshot to kill Goliath is right there in front of you. And so we're standing in this beautiful valley out on the grass. And I asked the guide, I said, I heard they built a church where David was standing. And he said, look down on the ground. We looked down, and in the grass is all these beautiful mosaics. He said, you're standing right where the church was, where they killed Goliath. And that, I could not believe that we were standing there. We went to the Dead Sea. It's below sea level. It's the saltiest body of water anywhere. You cannot sink. When you walk out into the Dead Sea, it is so salty, when you get waist deep, your feet come off the bottom, and you're like a cork. Well, you can drown in the Dead Sea. I almost did. I thought, well, no wonder they call it the Dead Sea. I almost drowned there. What happened, when my feet came off, instead of falling over on my back like I'm on a swim raft, I fell forward, and I couldn't get my feet under me. Thank goodness Charlotte was there to get me right-sided up. I was topsy-turvy. It is so salty. My mustache was whiter than it is now. I thought I had gravel in my water shoes, and it was big chunks of salt. And so anyway, they have showers there, so everybody has to, got to get the salt. It's an unbelievable place. But we went to the Sea of Galilee. And that's a picture of Charlotte and me on the Sea of Galilee, the most tranquil place you have ever seen in your life. We did sunrise service on the Sea of Galilee. Our preacher got us on this wooden boat that was exactly like the boats back during the age of Christ. And so we're on the Sea of Galilee, and the boat is stopped. He's preaching this beautiful service at sunrise. And that is a picture taken from the boat on the Sea of Galilee. And so I don't know what happened, but for probably 10 or 15 minutes, I had a real problem talking. I was so overwhelmed I couldn't talk. And Charlotte would say, "Are you okay?" I'd go, "Yes." I couldn't say a word. I don't know what it was, but it was so overwhelming. And then the guide said, right up there is where Jesus came down with the Beatitudes. And that just absolutely went all over. And then you see the place where he fed the multitudes with a fish, right there on the Sea of Galilee. It is so real. It's right there. We went to Jericho, and you can see the original walls of Jericho that came tumbling down. They built a new town there, but the remnants of the original Jericho are still there. That was overwhelming. We went to Bethlehem, and that was very, very moving. You get to see the manger where they pretty sure was where Christ was born, and there's thousands of people waiting in line to just file by the manger. It's inside a building, and it's protected. And some lady grabbed me by the arm as we're there, and she's just weeping. Hit her head on my shoulder. Never saw her before, never saw her since. But it was so overwhelming just to be there in Bethlehem. Then you go outside and you look over, and on the map it has Bethlehem, and then it has shepherd fields. And you look out and they tell you that's where the wise men came. And there's still shepherds there. You see these tents, and you'll see 30, 40, 50 sheep. And there'll be one little guy out there tending those sheep. They still have individual shepherds in the shepherd fields right outside of Bethlehem. It's unbelievable. And it's not a tourist thing, it's for real. They're just there. They're still doing exactly like they did 2,000 years ago. Charlotte and I got baptized in the River Jordan, where Christ was baptized. Very, very moving. This whole thing, Charlotte said, "You cried the whole trip." I said, "I did not." Just half of it. I couldn't help it. It was so overwhelming. Just being there, seeing the river where John the Baptist baptized Christ was just so moving and so overwhelming. We went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where these huge olive trees, they're as big around as that piano there. They're over 2,000 years old. They're the same olive trees that were there when Christ was walking through the garden. And our pastor told us, he said, pick out a tree and go sit by it for 45 minutes or an hour and just think. And so Charlotte and I did. We had 2 little stone crosses that we carried with us the whole trip. And so we're sitting by this beautiful olive tree, and other people were sitting around, all 20 some odd of us. And one of the most moving things that I've ever experienced, just sitting there in the Garden of Gethsemane. We went to a place called Masada. It is a big plateau in the middle of a God-forsaken desert. There are no trees, there's nothing. But on top of this plateau, it's like a flat-top mountain. King Herod had built his summer palace. And so this happened before Christ, but it's very important to Israeli history. The Hebrews revolted against Herod and the Romans. And so they ran the Romans off of Masada. And it's a beautiful palace and walls and mosaics and paintings on top of this big plateau with walls around it. And so the Hebrews ran the Romans off. So the Roman legions laid siege to Masada and had to build a huge ramp that went from the valley up to the walls. And it's probably 50 or 75 yards wide, so they could get the chariots up. And it's probably at least a quarter of a mile long. It took them 2 years to build this. So when they got to the top, finally, after having Masada under siege for 2 years, when they got there, there were 900 Hebrews up there. All of them had committed suicide rather than submit to the Roman army. So you can stand on Masada and you still see the outline of the fortresses that the Romans had built all around this mountain. And the Romans were a scourge to this whole area. I mean, they were very brutal. They killed people for no reason whatsoever. We all know that history. Anyway, the battle cry with the Israeli army is Masada, never again. That is their battle cry. And so that was very moving, being on top of Masada, knowing what happened there and how the Romans built that ramp, and it is still there. We went to the Valley of Armageddon, where the last battle will be fought. Y'all have all heard of Armageddon. And so there's a beautiful church called Mount Carmel up on the side of the mountain overlooking the valley of Armageddon. And down in the valley there's a V-shaped roads in the distance. And I asked the guy, I said, what are those roads down there? Because Napoleon had said that the Valley of Armageddon, or Megiddo as it's also called, is the most perfect place for a battle that he's ever seen. There's been so many wars fought right there in that valley. It's where, according to the Bible, the last battle will be fought. He said those are not roads, those are jet runways. He said there's an entirely Israeli Air Force underground with F-16 jets, F-15s, all kind of fighter planes. He said the ground will start shaking and all of a sudden those jets start firing from underground out those runways. He said within 5 minutes there'll be several hundred jets screaming overhead. He said they'll fly off and said they come back one by one, go underground, and it's all quiet. He said they're waiting for the last battle. They're ready. They've even got nukes under the valley of Armageddon. It is really chilling. Our last day was the most overwhelming day that we spent. We went to the room where Christ had the Last Supper. That's hard to get over. Then you walk over to the place where Pontius Pilate handed, bear with me, where Pilate I'll get through this. Where Pilate handed down the death sentence on him. And you talk about chilling. You're standing right there. You're standing on the same stones. These big stones, and they're smooth from millions of people walking on. So you're standing on the same stones that Christ was standing on when that sorry Pontius Pilate handed down the death sentence on him. So we went from there to the Via Dolorosa, which translates into the road of tears, the road of sorrows. And that is the street where Christ carried his cross. And so the stones there are the same ones that he walked on. They've been there for thousands of years. And, you know, Jerusalem, this is in Jerusalem, it has been the most fought over city over eons of time of any city anywhere. There's been more bloodshed there in Jerusalem than anywhere else. So we walked the Via Dolorosa. And as we're walking, two guys come walking past us carrying this big wooden cross. And I just about lost it. We finally made it to Calvary. And I'm going to show you a picture.
That's it. That's it.
That is it.
Yes.
Can y'all see that?
We can see it up there.
Oh, yes. Okay. Calvary is also known as Golgotha, the place of the skull. And I always wonder why it was called that. And it's because there's a skull in the side of the mountain, as you can see. You can see the eyes there, or the nose. It's very clear. That's the last thing Christ saw when he was pulling that cross up on the hill. And where we were standing was where they were hurting him so bad. And I told Charlotte, I said, I'm not even worthy to be standing here. So I asked our guide, I said, can we go up on the top? He said, no, you can't go up there. Christians can't go up there. I said, why? He said, there's over 1,000 Muslims buried on the top of Calvary. And I lost it. I said, dig them up and throw them off the cliff. Get rid of them. I said, Calvary belongs to the Christians,
Amen.
not the Muslims. So that was a very, very emotional time for all of us. You're standing right there at the base of Calvary, and you're looking up there, and you're standing right where they were beating him, taunting him. Just the thought of it makes you so sad and so sick. The tomb is close to Calvary. So we went in the tomb. You can actually walk in the tomb. The big rock that they believe was rolled in front of the tomb is still there. Very, very emotional. You're standing there right where it all happened. It is all so real. It's all in the Bible. The Holy Lands and Israel back it all up. And so if you ever have the chance to go to Israel and see all this, it's a life-changing experience. And I advise you, please do. Don't wait. There's a lot of walking, but it's all right there. And we went to Jacob's Well. We went to so many places. I just don't have time to list them all. But it was an incredible trip. It was very inspiring. It put everything in perspective. And you will be walking on the same stones that Christ walked on. We went to the Wailing Wall. We've all heard about that. We said prayers, left prayers on the wall, which they encourage you to do. Anyway, please go if you have a chance. It will be the trip of a lifetime that you won't believe and you will never get over. And so, thank y'all so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Some of these things, when I talk about them, are overwhelming, and it's kind of hard for me to get through. But thank y'all so much. God bless every one of y'all. God bless this church.
God bless you.